In a world, in a time of tradition, in a city where anything can happen, in a war that isn't his, driven by competition, in a world that's powered by violence. This holiday season, secrets have a way of coming back to haunt you. For good, for justice, for freedom, for family, for keeps. The passion is real. They don't follow the rules, they make them.
Excited today to welcome a duo of game masters who specialize in storytelling and role-playing events. We have GM Kenstrom and GM Quilic joining us today. So welcome both of you to Town Square Central, and thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's good to be back. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'd like to start by having each of you explain your general approach to storytelling. And Quilic, we've heard your approach in the past in the second episode of this podcast, which everyone should go and listen to if they haven't already. So Kenstrom, let's start out with you explaining your approach to storytelling, and then Quilic, you can share how your approach may have changed since the last time that we spoke. So Kenstrom, why don't you lead off here?
I look for always something unique, and I want to try to find something that's always going to be fun, but also give a variety of things for people to do, just because we have such a variety of players and what they like, different levels, different styles. Some like invasions nonstop, some like the role playing. So first and foremost, when I create a storyline, I try to come up with pieces that at least touch on little things with that. It does tend to evolve though. Like my approach is usually bare bones. I do wing some stuff, which sometimes gets me in trouble, but that way it just allows me to respond to players. It allows me to get them engaged. Sometimes they come up with ideas, and I implement it. Either from watching them, spying on their conversations, they come up with ideas. Their reactions to my NPCs sometimes spawn new things as well. So, and I try to always build off of something. Like very few of my storylines have nothing to do with any of the other ones, which I don't know if that's good or bad if you're trying to jump in and stuff. But I would say that they still are standalones in a sense that you can kind of jump in whenever you want, but there's always something tied to like previous ones, whether it's my 14-month-long Crossed in a Shadow storyline that I did years and years ago, or like a year-long Keeping Up with the Kestrel storyline, or just like a small like month storyline or 3-month storyline. There's always some type of facet that's connected with other stuff. So I try to keep it that way because it just feels organic, feels like an actual a soap opera, but it feels like a real life. I mean, sometimes it is. I've seen some of the whispers. I don't know, but but it totally it just kind of builds on that, and it helps to bring people involved, and then people can like talk about it, you know, in the game. So it's like, oh yeah, I remember this 8 years ago when this happened, and it just makes it more impactful because you build those characters over time. That if they do end up dying, it's actually, you know, it wasn't just like, oh, this person was here for like 2 weeks for a storyline and great, who cares?
So they're episodic, but they're also part of a loosely connected larger sequence.
Yep, for sure.
Okay.
Let me just jump in here. One of the cool things for one thing, I completely agree with just about everything he said there. One of the cool things about having those little tidbits that tie into previous storylines is that's a really great way for a character to feel like they're having a huge impact when all they're really doing is talking about something that they remember happening to a bunch of people who weren't there before. I mean, right there, you've manufactured a moment for that person to be able to sort of step to the forefront for just a minute or two to be like, hey, I was around last time that guy showed up and he did this, this, and this. And for a few minutes, you know, your life is easy because they're kind of carrying the story for you.
All right. And one last thing before I forget, because I sometimes have ADD, but so that's the other thing too, like he's talking about, like having those players involved, like actually spawns ideas. So that's where I get some of my ideas is from the players' reactions. So there's this character who's dead now, and I promise he's dead. He's not going back. Drangale is how I pronounce it. You guys all these weird things like Winnemers. No, it's Weinheimers, right?
Weinheimers? Get out of here.
I'm just kidding. I know you guys
You're
call
wrong.
it Weinheimers. Hey, look, I'm the guru, so
Yeah, well,
I
the
say
guru
goes.
needs some guruing, I think.
I know. Hey, look, I can say it. I started playing when I was like 12, so back then that's what it meant to me. So,
Yeah, all right.
but so he was supposed to die. He was like this troll guy, and they were gonna kill him at the end of the storyline. It was literally in my outline, like, dude dies, and the players were like, "No, let's not do that." I'm like, "What?" So they end up trying to like cure him from his curse, and I'm like, let's go with it. So we just kind of winged it. I made up some stuff and random messaging, and then all of a sudden we saved him and put him in jail, and then he became a major villain in 2 other storylines. I'm like, okay, but literally on the rough draft on the very first version, he was dead. So that's what I kind of just build off of players sometimes, is that, I mean, there's 2 big storylines that he was involved in simply because the players decided to keep him alive.
And
Which should go to show,
time.
kill them all the time.
yeah.
Just kidding, no, I'm totally
And
joking.
Quilic, I'm hearing some echoes of some of what we'd talked about in an earlier conversation here with sort of your approach. Can you talk about yours too?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. I mean, honestly, I think it's just a matter of semantics. It's basically the same approach. The only thing that's slightly different, it sounds like, is when I'm crafting a storyline. Like I've mentioned before, I tend to start at the end. I start at the climax of the story, if you will, and I work my way backwards. I have a moment in mind that's like, I want this really cool thing to happen, and then it's like, what steps do I have to take? How do I have to maneuver everybody and manipulate everybody to get to that moment? That's sort of my initial approach. But it's a framework. I mean, it's, you get started and somebody comes up with some crazy, wacky idea, and you have a moment of, man, that would be really cool. So then you go, okay, let's see how we can make that work, and you're just on the fly, and it's a rut. It's a ton of fun.
Storytelling in an interactive role-playing game like this is going to inherently be some combination of a lot of planning and guessing and speculating, and then like wild improvisation, no matter how much planning you do, right?
That's very fair to say, yes.
Yeah.
I've had times where I finish up a round of story time or whatever, and I'll turn to my wife and go, I wonder what I meant when I said that.
How will they interpret this?
I'm reacting to something that somebody else said, and I'm like, next time this comes around, I'm going to need an answer for that, because I don't know where that came from, but sure, let's run with it. And as long as you keep the end goal in mind, again, that moment that I'm building towards, that's always where my stories, at least, that's where they're going. And whatever route the players sort of guide things along, we're always going to end up there, and it's just more fun if they have a little bit of agency and can be like, hey, let's go talk to the alchemist. Well, I wasn't planning for you to talk to the alchemist. Give me 30 seconds and I'll throw something together and we'll go have a conversation with the alchemist. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
And
all right, I want to ask you about this because I just think it's fun. And this idea actually came from my spouse when we were planning our wedding. She said, I want you to come up with 3 words that after we get married, you want to say, wow, that wedding was blank, blank, and blank. And I came up with like dancing, drunk, and fun or something. And hers were similar, but it was a good way to sort of like orient ourselves with the way we were thinking about our expectations. So similarly, I want to put it to you two, where I want you each to give me, to sort of summarize your approach or your philosophy when it comes to storytelling and what you're trying to do in general as a Gemstone sort of world's GM in 3 words. What are your 3 words?
You go first.
I was going to say you go first. Ladies first, please.
You go first
Please.
cannot be your 3 words.
Yeah, actually, that's good. I like that. You go first.
That actually could work, right? For an improvisational thing.
Hey, players, you go first.
Go first.
Damn it. Okay. First of all, maybe impact.
Okay.
Like, I love storylines that leave something behind,
Okay.
whether it's a change in characters or even like my approach to a storyline sometimes, because I've evolved over the years. Or even if it's just like a change to the game. Like, I love to leave little things behind, like, oh, there's our crater out by the coastal cliffs. What the hell does that mean? It's from 2012 or whatever. Like, little things like that build history. But especially like the character stuff. Like, I see lots of people like change over the course of storylines that weren't the same. That to me is the biggest kind of thing. Can I just use the same word 3 times? Impact, impact,
You can
impact.
use synonyms for impact, but you have to have. Actually, yeah, no, we'll allow it. Impact, impact, impact. That's fine.
Yeah, and just no, I don't add like entertainment. Like I want people to have fun, and they all have different versions of what that looks like. So that's difficult sometimes.
Well, I'll give you my, and I'm probably gonna.
No, that's it. Those are my impact words.
All right, Quilic.
Okay. So unlike other people, I can follow directions. So for 3 words,
I'm excited for this collab, guys. It sounds good.
Yeah, our last one ever now. Apparently.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say growth. I'm gonna say enjoyment, and I'm gonna say immersion.
Okay.
And then now that I've satisfied the requirement, just to elaborate just a little bit, I feel like much the same way he's saying impact. Again, I think we're just talking semantics. When I say growth, I want the players who got involved with the story to come out on the other side feeling like their character has changed at least a little bit. Like some facet of what I put them through has changed their character just a bit. And that's like the biggest kick I get out of it. If at the end of the story somebody tells me, man, I never would have thought that my character would have done that, then perfect, wonderful. Yeah. And I want my stories to matter. I mean, and again, that kind of goes back to what he's saying, impact. I don't want a story to end and everything's the same as when we started.
Yeah, you also want a smoking crater at the coastal cliffs.
That's right.
Metaphorically speaking.
I would just like to add, for the record as well, the word impact can actually encompass growth, enjoyment, and immersion. So I did in 1 word what he did with 3. I'm just saying.
Oh, this is gonna be good, guys. I'm excited. All right, so speaking of, how did you're both well established, role playing, storytelling masters of your respective realms at this point. Even if you mispronounce what they're called. So how did all of this come about? What led to the idea of collaborating on this big project?
I think we met on like a GM dating website. Is that?
Yeah.
I thought we were going to talk about that.
What would the GM dating website be called? Like, what would the GM dating app be called?
I don't even want to speculate.
Weinheimer's Way?
God.
I'll let it go. It's Winnemer's. Fine, you win.
Yes.
I don't remember. How did it happen?
The initials that people have used for Kenstrom storylines for the longest time, the KST, is sort of iconic, if you will, at this point. When I started telling stories, I somewhat resisted the turning of mine into QST because I felt like it was too much of a ripoff. Now that I've met the guy, I don't care about his feelings. But so the players really kind of pushed QST to the point where I kind of went, you know what, fine, whatever, no big deal. And some of those same players are active participants in his storylines. And there'd always been kind of a low level, I would love to see what you guys did if you were to team up. Nobody would survive. It would be, and just, we kind of both come to a point where it's like, you know what, there's enough whispers.
You just stopped fighting it.
It was a gravitational well that sucked us both in.
So like all true romances begin.
If you say so.
I say so.
I'll go with it.
Apparently you're the expert, so.
I am, yeah.
Also, the great thing that it allows to happen with us combining is time zones. Because that's a big thing, too.
Because you're in the West Coast,
and
right?
I play... What?
You're in the West Coast, right?
I am. I'm in Arizona, so half the time I'm Pacific, the other time I'm Mountain. So, and I have progressively, gone on later and later. So like, it gets up there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm East Coast and I'm old, so I go to bed early.
Yeah,
so
I'm East Coast. I'm East Coast, and I don't think that I'm particularly old, and I still go to bed as early as possible. So,
you've got a young one at home, so that qualifies right there. Two young ones.
So, I'd imagine that you're both pretty used to building things the way you want in accordance with your own values and vision. Even though it sounds like there's some obvious overlap in your approaches. So what's it been like trying to work on a crossover storyline event with somebody else?
You want to go first on this one?
Super easy. Like, I didn't know what to expect.
I would
Big,
agree with that. It's
okay. I was gonna say, I'm like, gonna disagree right now.
Yeah,
Like, what are you, what's going on? Didn't it sound like he was gonna disagree for a second? Like, I would.
That's you're feeling guilty about something over there.
Yeah.
No, we quickly found that we're pretty much on the same page with this. It's at each stage of the planning, we'll like get into these fevered back and forth where it's like, and then what if this happened? Oh, I love it. Then what if we did this? Oh, that would be even better. It just snowballed. And
then there's a crater.
Yeah, exactly.
The smoking crater. Now, I'm going to be really disappointed if whatever happens in the storyline, there is not a smoking crater at some point. I just want to go on the record and say that.
I don't know.
I feel like there's a good chance.
But yeah, it's been super easy. Like I've done some collabs in the past, like years and years and years ago, and it was okay, right? It just, this one went super easy, and like the last thing I knew, I'm like, wait a second, we've got the whole thing done. Holy crap, let's submit it. We don't have to do this in 2021. We can do this right now. So, it was really good. Like, we'll do it again.
All right. So. Well, so speaking of, what can you tell us about the forthcoming story from an out-of-character perspective? It's like, when does this all begin? How long is this going to take to unfold? Like, what can you tell us?
Okay, so we're running roughly for the month of May. So if you're looking at your calendars, that's very soon.
Friday.
We've got May sort of blocked out for this. Because of the time zones, we probably won't, because we're both going to kind of stretch a bit as far outside of our comfort zones to try and make sure that we can overlap at times and things like that. But probably 4 weeks, give or take. Now, again, this is, like we talked about earlier, this is a framework and things could stretch or be molded into a slightly different schedule. But for right now, we're planning for the month of May.
And, I mean, you mentioned this, but since you are operating on pretty distinct timelines, how is this going to work given the disparity in your normal operating hours?
I don't know. I mean, we got timelines, we got events that we want to do. Like, we're going to assign stuff to each other to make sure that we're constantly in communication, to be like, hey, let's make sure we hit this here. So it should be like a good spread is what we're going with. That way people of all time zones can have something to be involved in, or both towns or whatever. So, well,
yeah, and I was gonna say that, Quilic, you are the Four Winds Isle guy, which is the premium only area, and then Kenstrom, I feel like you've definitely established yourself as the Wenhammer's Landing guy at this point. So how will that work, given that, I mean, not only are those two very different places, but FWI is a premium only area, so how is that collaboration going to work given that restriction? Like, is there going to be anything gated behind the premium subscription?
We're very aware of that. That was something that came up early on when we were talking about it. And there will be things that are, because again, that's my focus, like you said, there will be some things that are done on Four Winds, but we're being pretty careful to make sure that nobody's going to feel excluded from anything. There may be small things that occur that are for the premium folk only, and engaging things. Don't get me wrong, but it won't be critical to the overall story. Nobody's going to miss out on anything by not being able to get to Four Winds Isle.
Okay.
And to circle back to, like, a lot of the bigger events are going to be scheduled for the weekends, so that gives people even more of a hopefully chance that they're not having to stay up too late on like a work night.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it gives me a chance to nap.
Yeah. And getting his little Saturday naps. Yeah.
I love the Saturday naps.
A couple Werther's originals and he'll be set.
Absolutely.
So, what can you tell us about the forthcoming story from an in-character perspective? Like, I know there have been a couple of vignettes, right, that have detailed some things, but tell us what you can tell.
Very little. So for right now, the vignettes are pretty much all there is to say. Now, the vignettes have both featured the name of the storyline. The name of the storyline is All That Remains. That's what we're calling it, and that's not... And Kenstrom was gracious enough to name this thing so that I didn't have to go through the embarrassment of trying to come up with a horrible name for it.
Yeah, that's not your favorite thing to do.
It's, yeah. That's putting it mildly. So All That Remains and the vignettes. We had another pair of vignettes that went up today, which is the second pairing of them, and I recommend reading them.
Well, I was going to say we will link those in the episode notes for this podcast, but is there anything of note in those vignettes that you think players should pay particular attention to?
Everything.
Jerk.
We think we just wrote that for the heck of it? I can't say much. Sorry.
We're playing things pretty close to the vest. I would recommend reading them closely. There is a lot in there, and some of the things that might not appear to be particularly meaningful may end up being more so down the line. So I would recommend giving them a careful read.
Okay, fair enough. Cryptic and fair enough.
What if no one dies in this storyline? That's the plot twist.
I have a feeling that is not likely. Given your respective representations.
Right? No deaths at all.
That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
No.
Spoiler alert, deaths.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so how will players be able to participate in these storyline events? What opportunities are they going to have?
You're up.
Rock, paper, scissors? Okay. I get super passionate about this, so we could probably do a whole session about involvement. Maybe we can one day. I get a little preachy sometimes, so I'll try to tone it down. Speak up. Don't get butthurt. When there's a room of 50 people and there's one GM, chill out. We're not playing favorites. No one should have their feelings hurt. We do our best. If you don't like it, try it yourself. You see what I'm saying? But no, really, my characters are great. I try to highlight those in my Stormfront, so I can see, even though people aren't speaking, they're thinking, and it highlights in my window. I love the message boards, the forums. If people can write their own little, stories or their own letters or different thoughts, that helps me capture people's names and know who to look for, and it kind of stands out. Oh, okay, this person wants to play. I'm going to highlight their name so I can see them in the crowd of 80 people, right? So, but just never take anything personal. No one that I know anymore comes in and says I only want to play with these 4 people. So just and ask around. Honestly, there's a crap ton of players that will tell you stuff. They sit in town and they rehash events. Blogs are great, to read up on stuff, but just put yourself out there. And I'm trying to think of anything else. You go now, and I'll wait to come with anything else.
Right. I agree with all that. I mean, it's really simple. If you want to be involved, show up. Show an interest, talk to people. I mean, you're not going to be able. You can't sit back and expect it to get spoon fed to you. I mean, you need to do something. We're here to. I mean, we both said earlier. I mean, we want you guys involved, and we're happy to work with you on that. If you post a letter on the message boards to one of the characters, as long as it's not going to mess anything up, odds are pretty good you're going to get a response back. And there's ways to do it. And there are players who have been active in Kenstrom storylines for a decade now, who know his ins and outs and know a lot of the history, and they're really easy to find. And you could easily strike up a conversation with one of them. They're happy to bring you up to speed. Similarly, I have people who are very familiar with my storylines and would be happy to speak with you about it. But you got to do it. You can't just show up and, in a crowd of 80 people and you smile a few times and maybe you raise your hand once and then you leave going, I was ignored and I don't know why, and just be all upset about it. We're doing the best we can. I promise.
And one thing I try to do with some of my NPCs, even though it may sometimes make them look like they're stupid, but at the end of every kind of session before I'm leaving, sometimes I'll say, "Does anyone else have any questions?" As the NPC, and I'm like, "Man, would that person even ask that, or would they just be like, peace out, I'm evil, bye?"
Right.
But the point is, I do it because I know there's still potentially people in the crowd that haven't had their question answered, and it's not because I'm ignoring them. It's simply because there's, the ratio is 80 to 1, right? So sometimes I'll do that. So wait for that if you want to ask the NPC a question or you want to do something. Whispers are good, just all the type of stuff. The other thing too, to go to that back to the comment, I've had characters in all my storylines throughout the decade. Yes and no. I could probably create a list of every single storyline where there's a handful of like player characters that maybe did extra stuff and stood out more. Like maybe they did something that got them kidnapped by the villain, or maybe they did something that did whatever. So maybe they got the spotlight a little bit more. But I can guarantee you that almost in every single storyline, that list has changed and evolved over the years, because the people that started in one of my storylines back in 2010, they're not even around anymore.
Yeah.
2011, they're not even around anymore. Like the cast keeps almost revolving, and that also makes it unique for me, because I don't then rely on certain people to help me drive my storylines, because they may not even be here, or they may not be able to show up at the same time, or their jobs change, so they have different hours. So like every storyline is a new opportunity to propel yourself out in the spotlight, but you gotta do it too.
You gotta show, and in showing up, there's a lot of ways you can do that, right? Like you can just go to the event and sort of feel it out, and if you're not experienced with it, just stand there and take it in and try to get involved. And if you don't want to get involved, then try some other means, right? Like go on the official forums and see if you can get involved in some like out of game but in character way that way.
Just to throw a scenario out there. When you show up for the first time, you're in this crowd of 80 people, you're completely overwhelmed, you're not sure what's going on, you don't know what the history is or anything like that. You look at the people who are talking, you look at the people who are interacting back and forth with the NPC, and you afterwards you go up to them and go, hey, excuse me, sir or ma'am, I couldn't help but notice there appears to be a lot going on here. Do you have a few minutes to talk with me about it? Take a little bit of ownership of that, and odds are pretty good that person's going to be happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, if they're putting that much effort into role-playing at that, they're probably pretty excited to talk to you about it too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we want to cover, like in general, related to this that we didn't get to before we get to the final thoughts and closing here?
At the risk of copyright infringement, by deeds.
By deeds.
Yeah. Hey, whoa!
Whoa, you're getting into the 3 words here. All right, slow it down.
You know what though? I will say one thing, and you can add this, is like, I don't know if this makes me like a idiot savant or something, but like, now savant is the right word, right? I can say that. That's the right pronunciation.
Wait, are you confirming that savants are?
No, my God.
That's it. I'm out.
And this is my last podcast.
Yeah.
No, but like I do notice that as I create certain things in storylines, and I swear to God, I'm not stealing other people's ideas, but like I'll see other things in other areas of fiction, like in different media, and I'm like, the hell? They just stole my idea. Like I did the whole like, the bleak lands, we destroyed Talador, but there's all these different little tiny spots that are called the Tears of Core, where like it didn't get destroyed and they're just like little patches of grass. And then like it kind of looks like that in like the Avengers movie, where like they're blocking stuff with shields as the rain and the hail comes down. And I'm like, damn it. And then like at the end of my wishful thinking storyline, I was going to have Pylasar like disappear in time somewhere. And then I'm watching the end of Avengers. I'm like, son of Captain America just went back in time and didn't bother coming back until he was old. I'm like, what is going on?
I really like the idea that I don't know who wrote the Avengers, but whoever did, that he is like secretly attending these in-character Gemstone sessions for the purpose of getting his script writing notes.
Right? And then like I'm watching the Crisis of Infinite Earth thing on like the CW with all the Flash and Green Arrow, and literally in my wishful thinking storyline that I wrote in like May last year, by the way. And then I'm like, there'll be these Paragons, and they have to go through time and destroy them to end the witch. And then like I watch Crisis, and the dude's like, there are 7 Paragons. I'm like, oh damn, this is just too much now. Like CW, you are legit stealing my ideas.
This is great.
Or somehow I stole them, but I don't know why. So,
I very much prefer the first scenario there, which is that these studio executives are like mining Gemstone storylines.
I think so. Like someone in our game somewhere was like, I'm waiting for the next big storyline crossover.
That'll be a future podcast
make
episode.
Season 7 of The Flash.
A future podcast episode will be getting all the GMs to try to sniff out the rat. It'll be great.
Seriously.
I will say, just along that same line, the worst that is when the inverse happens. So like I've already had it happen, and I'm sure you probably have, probably on multiple occasions. You do something, you run out a story arc that you feel like is totally original and really cool, and then somebody gives you an out of character whisper and goes, this is just like whatever TV show. And I'm like, I've never even heard of that. And I go and I Google it, and I'm like, holy crap, that is exactly like it.
I've totally had that happen too. I'm like, oh, I suck.
Yeah. It's actually,
like,
Kenstrom, what you're seeing is just you watched the Avengers and then you wrote your storyline and you watched it again and you were like, wait a minute, this is just like the Avengers movie that I watched.
No.
Yeah.
I've been playing that one for 4 years, so I'm just saying.
All right. So once all of this is said and done at the end of May, whenever we're getting started, how will you measure your success with this effort? Like, what does that look like for you?
Impact. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
you go first.
How many smoking craters are left? Is that the answer?
I want everybody to enjoy themselves. I mean, that's kind of a cliche answer, but that's true. I mean, this is kind of a big deal for us. And, I, at the risk of sounding slightly unmodest, it's kind of a big deal for the players. There aren't very many crossover events, so there's some built-in expectations. Kenstrom and I both have, he far more than I at this point, but have a little bit of a reputation. And we're just kind of hoping that we can entertain people.
Is that a good reputation or a bad reputation?
Let's just say good for the sake of your feelings.
I will say, Kenstrom, I know you as the landing guy who likes invasions. That's the way that I know you.
I would like you to know that I did one storyline for 12 months where I had only like one invasion. So.
I don't know. I'm not a storyline guy. So this is gonna be my like foray into trying to roleplay. And I told Quilic and I were talking the other day, and I told him that I can't decide how I want to try to be as obnoxious as possible for you all without being obnoxious to the other players. Like, I don't want to distract other people. I don't want to ruin their experience, but I want to be mildly under your skin the whole time. That's my goal.
We have tools to deal with your kind.
That's
right. What do I want? Like, I guess if there's it was a success, right?
Right.
That's how Wait,
Okay.
Can I say that? I don't know. Strike that from the record.
Stricken.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cliche, but like people enjoy themselves. Like I want them almost clamoring for more at the end. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
And because I want that too. Like this is the first time that I've done collab in a long time, and I've been wanting to wade into that, but I've kind of been playing in my own sandbox for a long time, for whatever, good or bad. But I want this to just be successful, people to have fun so that we can do it again and grow from it. Because like I said, like you learn from every storyline. Every storyline I send out like a feedback form on the post to be like, what did you like? What didn't you like? Because I want to know what they like too, right? So I can keep doing that and not lose that. But I also want to know like what didn't work for certain people. Like how can I avoid that? And I always love that feedback. So I think, yeah, just people enjoying themselves. The time zone thing would be a nice thing to kind of hopefully tackle where it's a bigger spread of death.
Story.
Sorry. Damn it. Strike that from the record.
Not striking.
No, don't. Keep that in. But yeah, that's it. Like just want people to have fun and enjoy it and ask for more. So
and from a personal point of view, I'm looking forward to sort of watching Kenstrom work from a little more up close, finding like little things that he does that maybe that's like, oh, I hadn't thought of doing that way.
Oh, you little voyeur, you.
Well, I prefer thief, but
Why not both?
Sure. So I'm looking forward to some of that as well.
Okay. Well, Quilic and Kenstrom, I know that I speak for a lot of players in saying that I'm really excited to see all this begin and unfold over the next month or so. So thank you both for taking the time to talk with us today, and I'm excited to see it start to happen.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We'll do it again.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. Many thanks to both Quilic and Kenstrom for joining me today to talk about their forthcoming storyline. Make sure you stop by and check it out when you get a chance. I have also included links to their vignettes in the episode notes for today's show, so give those a read as well. Also, a special thank you to Ephrup, Luktar, Lysel, Warclade, Helman, Darren, Heatheran, Lex Bubba, the Town Crier, Dree, Altherin, Conrash, and Seomantha for being patrons of the show. If you like the show and you also want to support it, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. The link to support the show can be found in today's episode notes. That's it for this week. Thank you all for listening, and catch you next time on Town Square Central.
Or like you could do like Weinheimers or Winhammers. I'm just kidding.
You are so wrong about that. I'm shocked.
I know I'm
that
wrong.
they
I
let
even,
you
like,
be in charge of a place that you don't
because
even
they never
understand.
they never asked me, you know, when I asked for it. They're like, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Denied.
Yeah. Like your final test. Yeah.